Hello and welcome to episode 4 of the High Stakes NASCAR podcast. I'm your host, Mike Bachmann, alongside Zach Catanzareti. As always, first race in the West Coast swing, a little mini West Coast swing this year in the books at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. Kyle Larson hits the jackpot, absolute domination in Las Vegas, even though it got a little questionable at the end. Tyler Reddick definitely gave him a little something there at the end, but regardless, I mean, Kyle Larson comes out on top in dominating fashion. But Zach, welcome. Thanks as always for joining me here. It's great to talk to you. How was your weekend, man?
It was good. It was good. I think we're being a little we're definitely lucky to have so much racing to start the year. I remember a while ago, like the truck series, especially, it was a slow start to the year. Like they would do Daytona, then it would be, a month until the next race, and then a month into the next race. But to have 3 straight triple headers to start the year was definitely really exciting, and just getting a sense of where everybody is, right? I mean, we see Atlanta and Daytona, and we've been, talking about it here, but you see a very specific type of racing there. But once you get to Atlanta or Vegas, we start to see what people have under the hood, what drivers have been cooking up over the off season, and some guys surprised us, and some guys not much at all. And yeah, I know it all started with Larson, and just what do you say other than it's just what we expect from one of the greats who are driving race cars in 2024. I think a few times a year we're kind of forced to stop and talk about his talent and his performance behind the wheel, and this is just one of those weeks.
Yeah, 100%. The weekend started and ended with Kyle Larson on both ends. And I mean, 181 laps led, sweeping of the stages. There really was no contest for the majority of that race, even at times. Just felt like deja vu for these guys, because as soon as they got close, they just could not seem to leapfrog him. And again, we talk about one of the drivers in the world, one of the faces of the sport, and he just continues to deliver. This entire team, man. They were just absolutely perfect all day. Cliff Daniels continues to show why he's one of the best signal callers atop the pit box for this team. And for Hendrick Motorsports, I mean, they're second to 2024, and Kyle Larson now takes over the points lead, with Chevrolet also winning the first 3 races of the year. But like you said, it's like the real quote unquote, the first real race, right? Get to see what these guys and these teams are made of, take away all of the chaos and just the nature of super speedway racing. And we get a much greater indication, especially from the manufacturers, understanding Toyota and Ford's new body and kind of where they stack up in comparison to Chevrolet. And obviously Chevrolet is still winning all these races. But we'll certainly talk about some of those drivers and just kind of the state that those manufacturers are in. But for Kyle Larson, big win. It was awesome to see him celebrate with his son Owen on the front stretch. Really cool moment with those. And I mean, just for Larson, you have to look at him, and we're going to be looking at him every single week as one of the front runners, one of the elite picks every single week, because he can get it done anywhere. So to get it done this early, and to technically go back to back Vegas, he won there in the fall. So good stuff for him and that 5 team, and they have as much speed as they always have. And the biggest thing is that they continue to execute, and they continue to be perfect. And I think the scarier thing that kind of we can draw back to as well with Larson is we talk about how he gets wrecked out in every super speedway. And I know that his super speedway results still aren't great, but we're starting to see a little bit of the upward trend, I feel like, in that department for Larson. So if he could put together more finishes and actually finish the races on these super speedways, I mean, he could be borderline untouchable once again. We could be looking at a potential 5-win, maybe even more for Larson this year, judging how the rest of the progression of the season goes. But still, just a statement made by that 5 team this weekend in Vegas, man.
Yeah, I think a lot of what we saw in 2021, like that big comeback year, 10-win season, it's nearly impossible to do that. No Harvick and Truex and Kyle Busch, they've been close. They've been around 8 or 9 wins, but the next gen era is just a different animal. It's a lot easier to have a DNF because of how, just how these cars, react when you hit a wall. I mean, they hold up pretty well, but then when you judge the toe link and things like that, and all the pit issues and how that can lead to problems, it's a lot tougher to close these races out. and he hasn't been able to match that number from 21. But these last 2 years, I feel like he's just as dangerous. And Sunday he was on average, he was second. That was his average running position. He had a near perfect driver rating, 148 out of 150. I don't know where that 2% was. He didn't lead every lap, so I guess that was it. But it's wild how much you can achieve statistically in one race. He's leading stage points now this year. But I mean, we texted a little bit during the race, and I felt like Reddick had a little bit of something for him. I felt like a pass probably wasn't going to happen, but it wasn't a traditional runaway, like where somebody didn't have a leg up on the guy who dominates. It kept on getting closer and closer at the end of every stage. Reddick was really closing in a little bit, really had something going on that high lane. No surprise there. And then at the end of the race, I mean, I was this close to standing up. I'm like, he was right on his bumper. And I'm like, if he judges the lanes right, and it all comes down to the aero blocking and just the lane choice and where you go with your race car. And it was just a total mind game. And I think in turn 3 and 4, Larson went high for one lap because he saw that Reddick had something going, and he lost half his gap. Like it killed Larson. He had to go back to the bottom. So that's when he knew he was a little bit in trouble. And man, just coming to the white, I don't know what Reddick was thinking. I mean, we say it's a mind game, so you just have to go where you think he's not going to go. And he went low behind Larson coming to the white. And I love Boyer and Harvick in the booth. I think they went, oh. As soon as they saw him go down, one of them went, oh, because they knew he was in trouble once you get behind him like that. And yeah, he washed up and it was over. And I know Reddick is kind of rethinking that move. But again, it's just where you put your car. And once you have the lead in these type of cars, it's such a massive advantage, and it's an advantage that's earned. But it was a masterclass from Larson. He did everything that he should have done. We know with him, with these late races, we've seen it with Kyle Busch, we've seen it with other drivers, Hamlin. Sometimes it leads to contact, and we love that, but the drivers don't love that. And I was waiting for something to maybe happen with those two. I know Reddick usually he gets mad at himself more than he does at other people. I remember him and Chase Briscoe at the Bristol dirt race. They had contact and they kind of shook hands, and he was cool with it. So I wouldn't expect any hot blood between those two. But as you said, you mentioned it before with Reddick and what this team is capable of. They have so many issues, with pit road, and a lot of guys did. But a race like that, it's really important to get that lead, get that clean air, and just with issues that he had, and then Bubba was even bigger. It's really hard to come back from that. The ceiling is second, third, fourth, fifth, and he got about as high as he possibly could have in a situation like that.
Yeah, 100%. And in talking about Reddick and like his personality, like for sure, he definitely does get more pissed off at himself than he does other drivers, and he's just not that kind of guy that's gonna give the guy in front of you, the bumper. I feel like he's reserved in that sense, and it's something to respect, but also too, it certainly limits your ceiling. And it's not only that, you mentioned the the struggles on pit road, just this team, and even 23XI as a whole. I feel like the one thing since this team's inception has been the team, they just can't put it together entirely. And if Tyler Reddick was able to overtake Larson there, I mean, I feel like he would have ran away with it much like Larson did. Their speed was extremely comparable. It's just like you said, the aerodynamics of the cars. Larson just a masterful job of being able to guess where Reddick was going and take away those runs. Protecting that lead was really impressive, and Larson does it better than most drivers, even when the handling of the race car kind of falls under you a little bit. But for Reddick, I mean, he said it in his post-race interview, same shit, different year, same shit, different stage, man. It was the same result every stage. And it was nice to see these guys battle. It's just like Reddick still, I feel like, has yet to be on the winning end of these battles. I mean, he and Larson, two incredible wheelmen with very similar backgrounds, and we love to see these battles, but certainly would be nice to see, a little bit of an injection into Reddick, to give Larson a little bit of business, and make it a little bit interesting. But let's talk about some of these drivers, especially the drivers that had a ton of issues. I feel like this race, beyond Larson's domination, was just marred with snafus on pit road, dude.
Sure.
Reddick was one of them, and a couple of these guys were able to salvage it and come back. Reddick, Ross Chastain, he overcame a pit road penalty. I mean, Chastain too, I feel looked like he had one of the strongest cars in terms of speed. He was creeping his way up the leaderboard and was able to salvage a top 5 finish after overcoming that pit road penalty. So that number 1 car is fast. I mean, we're going to talk about him again this weekend at Phoenix, but he just, and when you can't put together a clean race, you're going to be limited. And you look at some of these other guys that were not able to really overcome it. Kyle Busch. I mean, early in the race, before Reddick, it looked like Kyle Busch had a car to contend with with Larson. He was leading laps. He was up there. He kept a pretty nice gap between Larson. Didn't let him get away too much, but eventually Larson just ran away with it. And I feel like in Kyle Busch in his career over these last few years, it's just been all these mistakes on pit road, whether it be his own doing or his team. Opens the season with 3 straight races with pit road penalties. And that's not going to win you races. That's not going to win you championships, especially a driver of Kyle Busch's caliber, a multi-time champion. You would think that he would have this stuff cleaned up. But they continue themselves in the foot, and that 8 car has had a ton of speed to start the year. They just haven't been able to put it together. And Kyle Busch is really going to have to fix that and, clean these things up. But you mentioned Bubba Wallace, another driver who looked to have top 5 speed, but lost multiple laps due to that lug nut. And then Chris Buescher, these tire problems with these tires and these lug nuts. He loses the tire on track. He gets first DNF in over a year. So just goes to show how consistent that 17 car has been in finishing races. So a DNF in over a year, is certainly noteworthy, but just a number of mistakes for these drivers that cost them big time. And, we did have some drivers that were able to take advantage of some of that, but still in the first real race of the year, when you have green flag pit stops and you got to execute, certainly be some rust for these teams, some growing pains, but it's certainly concerning seeing that we have just, all these guys, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There were probably some more that were missing, but those were certainly the more worthy drivers who were in contention and had speed, brought it this weekend. So tough to see, but they're certainly going to have to clean it up.
In such a wide variety of issues too, like you mentioned, tire violations, Gibbs, with the 54 team, we saw that in real time. They were showing his pit stop and that tire rolls right off. We're like, get it. No, it's out of the box. And he was one of the rare ones to be able to come back. Just shows how quick of a car he had. Carson Hocevar as well. He was running around 10th to 15th, and he had a pit issue, and then he was able to come back to right where he was. But Kyle Busch's issue happened later in the race. And he just wasn't able to fight his way back through. It just wasn't enough time. And just an issue like that, just barely over the line. I think the team they chose not to play it safe. That, they saw that it was close to the line and they just assumed that it was okay because it literally was by inches. And I think situation like that, just back her up, just back it up, put the jack maybe wasn't even up yet, just pull it back. We see him do it all the time. And I think going forward, they're going to play it safe because what happens on the other end is your race is done. You're not just having a pit stop that's 3 seconds, 4 seconds slower. Now you're behind, half a lap because you're all the way at the back of the field on a restart. So you get situations like that are completely on you as a team, as a driver. And then you get, William Byron, where you run over the biggest trash bag I've ever seen. I didn't think that was a bag. I thought the peel, like the paint scheme, that's actually a wrap. Yes. I thought the wrap flew off because it was all black on the car. And
I'm with you there.
Yeah, that it's a bag.
I'm with you there.
Yeah. So and of course they had to make an unscheduled pit stop. You got to get that off right away. There's not a breath of air that's getting through that. 2 layers of thick black rubber.
Hmm.
And I'm sure that hurt the engine a little bit. I mean, we heard about what the temperature got from the low 200s to like 350 around that. So it goes into a certain mode at a certain point. And if he was at 100%, I was surprised he didn't come back quicker than he did. We really didn't hear about him the rest of the day. You just salvaged the top 10 at the end, but early on it was him and Larson. I felt like that was the duo we were going to have to deal with all day. And once he had that problem, he lost all that time, and we just didn't see him again. So I don't know if the engine kind of went into a kind of a damage protection mode, and he wasn't able to bring 100%. But that was about it from him. And Christopher Bell as well. You mentioned his name. Had that tire issue really early. He spun on lap 158, I believe, and he crashed out in Atlanta. So he's earned 8 points the last 2 races since a great Daytona to start the year. So that's keeping him kind of in the middle conversation. But back-to-back races that he's going to want to forget. A lot of guys want to forget these last couple weeks for sure.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, Christopher Bell, feel like just was tossed the kitchen sink this entire race. I thought, this was going to be a really good spot for him, but just issue after issue, plaguing that number 20 team. When you talk about William Byron, bag was one of the more bizarre moments I've seen.
Mm-hmm.
And I was with you, dude. I was like, what the hell happened? Like, because I thought it was damage or something from the wrap too, not just some garbage bag.
Right.
But, had that not happened, it probably was going to be the Kyle Larson, William Byron show with the speed that these two guys have. And for Byron to still be able to come back and salvage a 10th place finish is really impressive. So, tip the cap to that team for rebounding and not giving up early and coming back to, get a good finish. But yeah, just a very strange moment there. That stuff happens just by chance. You get crazy stuff that happens like that. And, unfortunately Byron, they had to deal with it, but it certainly, the engine was hotter. It certainly didn't hinder the speed of that car because he was able to come back and do pretty well. I do want to talk about Spire Motorsports for a minute, man, because Corey LaJoie, he doesn't have the result to show for it, but I think it's really time to start taking this team maybe a little seriously. Like, there's going to be some overreactions. It's the first real race of the year. But Chevrolet, Spire Motorsports, I mean, preseason, Corey LaJoie had high expectations for this team. He really talked it up. He talked a big game. And, I mean, they've really kind of backed it up. They've come to play in 2024. And I feel like outside of Front Row, who, they kind of came back down this weekend, but I think that's more of a reflection of Ford's speed or lack thereof that they showed as a whole at Vegas. Spire looks to be the most improved team through 3 races. I mean, LaJoie had borderline top 5 pace at Vegas. He was comfortably in the top 5, a borderline top 5 for the majority of that race before he spun towards the end of it. And then Carson Hocevar, man, drove a very respectable race, finishing 15th. He was, around like 12th to 15th for most of the day. Zane Smith's day ended as soon as it basically began. So that was unfortunate. But you got to love what you see out of this operation. And we know that they've been raking it in the Truck Series, which shout out Raja Caruth. Hell of a win at Vegas for his first career win, especially with Christopher Bell and Kyle Busch in the mix. Just really, really good stuff from Raja. So big weekend for Spire, I would say, across the board. And it's just really encouraging to see this from a team who has invested a ton of resources in this operation, right? Like, they've put in the money, they've put in the resources, and it looks like for now, at least to start the year, they're getting a pretty good return on investment for what they got. So Corey LaJoie, I mean, he's been really good, man, and he's been up front. So I'm very curious to see kind of how it translates. We go short track racing in Phoenix this weekend and see if it's sustainable. But it's certainly noteworthy to see what Spire has done. But do you think that they could become a legitimate contender this year? Maybe not, for obviously wins on a week-to-week basis, but a team that could be there for the taking if the cars, play into their favor.
That's exactly it. Like, you talk about, top 5 speed, winning speed. That's just a different, kind of situation, or a different position for a team to be in. A team like Spire, I think they are definitely capable of putting themselves in a position where if the cards fall right, like you said, if there's, strategy plays, if there's, 2 tire, 4 tires, people stay out, even if it's a fuel run and just a couple guys, fall out, or if there's some attrition and some guys have issues, they have the potential to be there to pick up those other positions, and they'll easily be top 10, top 5. And LaJoie has the experience to run up front. We know he has made mistakes in the past, when it comes to Atlanta, Daytona, or other races when he's running for a win. But when he is up front, I mean, you said it, they did a strategy play on that 7 car and it was working out great. We saw something similar with Chastain at the end of the race, taking 2 tires, and he was able to stay up front. And LaJoie was the same thing. And I would feel like those are very different cars, from Trackhouse to Spire, but it was very similar result. And he was able to stay up front and, had a bit of an issue, and it led to an accident later. And Hocevar, he had a little problem, but he was able to come back. And with Carson, we've seen that potential from last year with the 42 car, and he had some top 15 runs there. He was 11th at Bristol. So we know he's able to do great things even without the experience or the knowledge of years of Cup laps. It usually takes years until you get to that stage, especially with smaller teams. But he had the most green flag passes of any driver, Carson Hocevar, and that speaks to how quick he was. He didn't qualify great. He ran, all the way to the top of the mid pack. He had that issue, drove all the way back. That's a lot of passes there. And they're in a really good position here. Spire has put a lot into the sport as a whole. They're killing it in the Truck Series, 3 straight wins if you count Nick Sanchez and that kind of alliance with Rev Racing, Kyle Busch's win, and now Rajah Caruth. And it is starting to kind of trickle into the Cup Series with these 2 guys running well. I know Zane Smith he has a lot of potential as well. It just hasn't been a good start to the year. He hit the wall at Atlanta, and then he hit the wall here and had a couple pit road issues on the team side, 36th on Sunday. So Zane definitely has to get his feet underneath him. It's been a different challenge on the 71 compared to the 7 in the 77. But once they get those things kind of squared away, I think it's going to be 3 cars that are going to be pretty consistently running top 20. And, top 10s are going to be a massive story once it comes to summertime.
Yeah, you love to see it. And in talking about LaJoie, I think he's certainly prone to mistakes, running up front, but I just think that's just because he doesn't have the experience of running up front, right? With the rest of these guys, and truly knowing how to close the deal and put together the entire race, especially in those closing laps when the pressure is on. So more the team is able to just get experience running up front and putting their cars in position is going to do wonders, and it's only going to help prove the entire operation. I mean, you talk about Carson Hocevar. I love Carson, man. Like, he's got all the raw talent in the world. It's on display. Like, I know it's one race, but you mentioned the results from last year when he was filling in at Legacy Motor Club, and really impressive stuff. We talked about the maturity of the driver, and I certainly think that race by race, it's only going to continue to grow because you're racing with the best of the best. And even last year, he gained a lot of maturity in the Cup Series with those starts. So just raw talent itself, like I really don't think he should be getting overlooked right now, especially when you look at the trifecta of rookies we got with him, Josh Berry, and his teammate Zane Smith. And Hocevar's got all the raw talent in the world to continue to get it done. And there's something to be said about drivers that bring that raw talent, even they might be in the best equipment. And I think Hocevar is certainly one of those guys that is going to continue to elevate the equipment that he's in, even being so young, but just really encouraging to see him, be consistent and kind of just hover around, the same couple of positions throughout the entire race. So in race number 3, with Spire, I think it's really good stuff. And again, it'll certainly get more of an indication now that we go short track racing and as we continue to just kind of, get the season under our belts here to see what we're truly made of. But really impressive stuff on the Spire side. Not so much though. Yeah, go for it.
Before we transition, wanted to give you a shout out because I know it's early in the season. It's the first little taste test of the real season. But when it comes to that rookie battle, with Zane and Carson and Josh Berry, I put my money on Berry. I know we're early, and Berry's statistically with the loop data, he's been passing a lot of cars and all that, but it doesn't really lead to a good finish. I thought Spire was gonna, you mentioned front row kind of hitting the earth and kind of coming back down to reality. I thought that was going to be Spire, but with them with, a top 5, top 10 run, a top 15 run for Carson, I wouldn't put him out of the conversation for rookie of the year. I thought it was going to be a runaway with Berry, but at least early on in these first 3 races, we got a bit of a battle here. It could be interesting, at least with those 2.
Yeah, and that's why I want Spire to continue to show this, because again, you look at the drivers running for the rookie of the year with Berry and Zane and Carson, and I mean, these are 3 really talented drivers. I mean, Berry finally gets his full-time shot with Stewart-Haas Racing, replacing Kevin Harvick, and then you got 2 of the hottest young drivers in Zane and Carson Hocevar, just talent-wise. Like, it's extremely compelling, and we want to see this, right? We want to see these rookies contend, and we want to see them, challenge and put together this battle. I miss the days of those rookie of the year battles when they're relevant, and they're not running 25th and trying to scrap away just stay, relevant because they're rookies. Like, we want to see them run well, and that's why, like, I'm excited for Spire. I really hope that we are able to see some sustainability here. And we're going to Phoenix this weekend, a track that I think we're really going to start to see what Josh Berry is made of. And before I transition to like more of like the negative side of coming out of Vegas, let's stick with Stewart-Haas Racing for a minute. Because they're a little interesting. They're a little interesting coming here out of Vegas. Shout out Noah Gragson, man. 6th place finish at his home track. Really good stuff. He was a back marker, I feel like, for most of this race. But the team really kind of found something there in the second half. And you just saw that number 10 car kind of creep up and up and up the leaderboard ever so slightly. And then he just kind of parked it in 6th place for the last handful of laps. And good on him, dude, for not only getting there, but being able to stay there. Like, that, I think, is the most impressive thing. It was no fluke. Like, you could talk about Daytona and all that, but this was no fluke. Like, he was in the back. The team made changes throughout the race. They never gave up, and comes home with the best finish for that 10 car on a 1.5 miles in 2 years. 2 years, which I think is even more telling how off Stewart-Haas has been, even with Eric Almirola. That's via Trey Ryan on Twitter. He's got some really good stats, really in the weeds. So definitely check him out on Twitter for just those random stats. But I mean, eye-opening, honestly, for a 1.5 mile finish for that car. But huge confidence boost for Gragson. Really good stuff. Chase Briscoe, another driver where it just kind of fell out here at Vegas, but he was a top 10 car for much of the day. He had really good qualifying speed. Maybe this 14 team has found a little something as well. I mean, Ryan Preece, Josh Berry, they were never really a factor, but see the improvements from Gragson throughout the entire race, and the speed that Chase Briscoe had brought early in the race wasn't sustainable. Those are signs. Those are good signs, and you certainly want to take any good sign you can have with Stewart-Haas Racing. And I think approaching Phoenix could be a very curious spot for them, because Chase Briscoe's a guy who has had a lot of success at Phoenix in his career. He's a former winner there. He finished 7th in this race a year ago. Josh Berry built his career on short track racing, and he was pretty solid in his couple of stints filling in for Chase Elliott last year. He was 10th Phoenix, that runner-up finish at Richmond. So I think you're going to certainly look at Berry. And if you're one of those guys with superstitions, I mean, look at the car he took over, Kevin Harvick, 9-time winner, his playground. So some superstition, some good juju with that, but very interested to see kind of what Barry could do on a short track and what the speed is there. Same with Ryan Preece, another short track racer who, last year that was certainly where we saw his strengths, even if it was still, mediocre at best. But you want to see the team improve just a little bit. And then Gragson, I mean, certainly still a wild card. We'll see kind of what he could do. But what's kind of your read on Stewart-Haas Racing here? Because we're getting some signs of improvement. Expectations still tampered, but it's at least encouraging to see, some of these positive blips that we're getting throughout the race. But I'm curious what your read is on Briscoe, though, specifically, because I think he's obviously the guy that is, he's elder statesman's the wrong way to say it, but he's the veteran on that team. He's the face of that team that has to lead these guys, to the promised land. So give me your thoughts on SHR, especially coming out of Vegas, what you saw, and Briscoe as a whole, especially kind of going into Phoenix. What's your read on the 14th?
Well, signs of life. I think that's the biggest thing to take away out of these, first 3 races. We spoke about it, preseason show, and I think a lot of people have been talking about it. Tony Stewart's talked openly, which is kind of crazy to hear a team owner say the words that he was saying coming into the year. But to see any speed at all is, I wouldn't say a win, good. But yes, it's good. It's good to see. And we've seen really solid speed. I mean, you mentioned Briscoe. He was really good at Atlanta. He was a show. He was the one pulling off those 3 wide moves, and that's what bit him at the end. He was in the middle. I think that was 4 wide at the time, and it just got too tight. And when you play that game, you win those prizes. And he was really good at Vegas as well. I was keeping an eye on him all day. From practice, qualifying. Gragson practiced really well, but he didn't qualify well. He wasn't running particularly that well. Briscoe, I felt like it was the opposite. And then they overlapped each other late in the race. Briscoe was going to the back, and Gragson on that last restart, Mike Joy's like, "Oh, Noah Gragson's 6th." Like, what the hell? How did he get to 6th? And he's running for a top 5. He was 5th at one point, and Chastain was falling back. I'm like, he's got a top 5 in the books. This is unbelievable. It took this 10-car, I think 9 races to get a top 10 last year with one of the most experienced drivers in the field. And for Gragson to be away for as long as he was, and to have a new manufacturer, a new team, new personnel, new teammates, everything, for him to, get the top 10 at Daytona, Atlanta, he didn't have a fair shot. And then to get a 6th here, that's huge for him. He's one of those drivers who's 80% mental. I feel, he's somebody who can spiral down. He's somebody who can get mad at himself, mad at other drivers. We've seen him do everything. He did everything in Xfinity, from kill it on the track to getting in fist fights, and that's been bringing it over to the Cup side. And I love that with him. He's somebody who I really want to see succeed in this sport. Him and Hocevar kind of have that same type of edge. And to see Gragson not only have this pace, but to, as you said, not be a factor all day, but then just pop up right at the end. Like, I think there's something to show for that, with somebody who might not have the best car or might not have the best hand of luck, but then they're still able to wrap around a good finish at the end. And Briscoe is just executing at the end. If he's able to keep his car underneath him and avoid mistakes. And I'm not entirely sure what happened in Vegas to cause him to finish, I think, 21st, which was right around Barry and Preece. They all finished right together, even though they ran completely different all day. And I think those two especially are capable of great things, at least in these early months of the year. Phoenix is a great track for Briscoe. You mentioned his win there. He has the top 5 and not the top 10. And with Barry and Preece, it's just, you just got to see where they fall into place. Are they going to have, is Preece going to have another 2023, which I think would be very detrimental to his career. And we may end up seeing him back in Xfinity or in a truck where he's going to kick ass. He's going to do great there. But just you got to be in the right position with the right team to succeed in Cup. And I just don't know if that partnership is working there. But that's something we're going to find out in these next few months.
Yeah, I'm rooting for Priest. He's a Connecticut
Big time.
native. I really love what he brings to the sport, and I've always just been a Priest fan for some reason. But yeah, I think that that seat is certainly went up because you look at Cole Custer, you look at Riley Herbst, down in the Cup
Yeah.
Series or down in the Xfinity Series rather.
Yeah.
Custer, the defending champion down there, and Riley Herbst, who has just been continuing to improve week to week. Really excited about him. We're gonna be Custer's gonna be looking to make his return to the Cup Series, and Herbst is looking to graduate up there as well. So could be some more turnover if some of these guys like these. Really can't get the job done. There's only so many seats to fill, and if SHR wants to keep these two guys in Xfinity, they're gonna have to make some difficult moves. But we'll see kind of where they go throughout the rest of the year. One more thing before we completely put Vegas in on the back burner. RFK Racing, man, has not been
Yeah.
the start that this team was hoping for. I mean, you look at Vegas, Keselowski was never really relevant, to be honest. He does
Mhm.
finish this race 13th, but it really was nothing for him. I mean, had an average running position of 22nd, and it
Yeah.
just was not great for that 6 car. We talked about Bush. We talked about Busher dead last. This team has not been able to really showcase their strengths to start the year, man. I mean, they had speed at super speedways, but wasn't terribly impressive.
Mhm.
RFK, this is a team that we expect them to control most of those races. Keselowski and Busher, they always find each other. And they always find clean air up front. But I feel like all we talk about now with RFK, especially to start this year, is Brad Keselowski's winless streak. Now at 100 races, that conversation that only continues to get louder.
Mhm.
So I know you had high expectations for this team. I mean, everybody did. To start the year. But what is your panic meter on RFK? Are you hitting a button right now? Are you giving some time? Like, do we still need to kind of see, what this team is going to do, or are you seriously concerned about the trajectory of where this team could potentially go this year?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, as we've mentioned 100 times, it is a small sample size, and you look at guys who are doing really well. You're like, okay, good start. Let's see how they go throughout the springtime and then the summer stretch. How that works out. And then you got guys who are really struggling, and you're like, is this a sign for what the whole season is, or is this just a little blip on the radar, and they're gonna come back in no time? I think it's the latter with them, though I am surprised that we didn't see the pace that I would expect in a Daytona 500 or an Atlanta Super Speedway race or even a mile and a half. I know of all the track layouts, I would feel mile and a half is probably the weakest, um, but not that weak. Like I would feel like top tens are still in the cards. And I know Busher had that wild issue in turn 1 and 2. I think he stayed out or he took 2 tires, and we saw him lead some laps up there, and he was just starting to kind of lose some positions. Then just that great slow motion shot, you just see the rim and the bolt just
Yeah,
go
it was
flying
that
out,
was
and
sweet.
yeah, and it calls
That
the
was
red
sweet.
flag,
Great
which
camera
is
work.
yeah, that kind of shows what damage it did that it must have done to the wall, because so many parts and pieces were missing when it hit the wall. It must have ripped some of the metal off the safer barrier. And then he was done, and Brad, I thought he would kind of pick up the slack, so to speak, and he just never did. And
Yeah.
he came out with a finish better than where he ran all day. A lot of guys, especially from the Ford camp, you look at Graxon, Blaney. Blaney was barely top 10, and he ended up third or third, I think, at the end. And
Hmm.
Brad kind of did that, but just 10 or 12 markers back, and not I didn't expect any slow start from those two. I thought they were really going to bust out, with a great 500, probably a 500 win. And then I expected the same with Atlanta. And then, once we get to the real season, just no issues, but it just hasn't quite been that way. And certain teams we see this, every year, teams just get off to a rough hand of races, and they're eventually able to kind of bring their people together and start busting out results, whether that's summertime leading into the playoffs, or if it's earlier than that. I think it's going to be earlier than that. So to answer your question, I think the panic meter isn't quite turned on yet, but definitely has my has my attention a little because I just didn't expect any poor results to start the year from them.
Yeah, and even kind of talking about it before, like I think it's more of a testament to just Ford right now, and really kind of getting used to the body because, like you said, Blaney came out of nowhere to finish third. Really impressive for him. But outside of that, I mean, it was Gragson in the
Yeah.
top 10. I mean, Joey Logano, he did not really, he didn't have race winning speed. You know, he said the car was plowing like a dump truck, and it sure as hell looked like it. It comes away ninth, was about a 12th place car, you know, the entire day. And then, I mean, outside of that, yeah, Brad Keselowski as the next on the board. Austin Cindric was running up there. He was another driver that had a pit road penalty actually as well. So he came home 29th. But I really liked Cindric's outlook. I still do. I think he's got some stuff to show this year. You know, to at least be a little bit more on par with Blaney and Leno, but he's not quite there yet. But we'll see what happens with RFK. I just think Ford as a whole is certainly a bit behind, and hopefully they could just find some success and put together some clean finishes to try and turn this ship around and not fall into a serious point hole to begin this year, because both drivers I think now sitting out at the top 20 in points through 3 races, and you certainly hope that they kind of turn it on and can get stage points, run up front, and at least salvage some of their days that way. But some really good stuff coming out of Vegas. I thought the race as a whole was just a good race. Despite Larson dominating, like again, just Reddick being able to contend certainly made it interesting. And I just thought kind of across the board there were a lot of different things that kind of happened. And we got some interesting drivers finishing in the top 10, some really good days for a number of these guys. So really good stuff. Excited to see what Phoenix brings. But before we go in and talk about some of those drivers for Phoenix, Zach, let's get the trivia question here. What do you got for me this weekend?
Okay, so I usually do 2 questions for you, and I try to make it a little easier since it's double the questions, right? But one of them's historical, one of them is definitely more recent. So we're going to start with the historical one first. Phoenix ran their first Cup race in 1988. Who was the winner of that race?
You're testing my knowledge here.
Yes.
1988.
And I have a clue if you need it.
I feel. Was it Kulwicki?
You got it. You got it.
It was Alan Kulwicki. Was that he did his rookie year? No,
I believe that was his rookie year. Maybe his second year. I forget if he was one of those guys who it took him a while to win, so it may have not been his first year.
Something about that 7 car. All right.
Yes, and it gave birth to the Polish victory lap.
That's right. Yes. Of course, dude. Yeah, that's right. Cool. All right.
Yeah. All right, so number 1. All right. And then number 2, Ross Chastain is going for back-to-back Phoenix wins after winning last fall. Who has the record for the most consecutive Phoenix wins, and how many was it?
Oh, that's a great one. I don't want to fumble the bag. I kind of just want to go chalk here and take what I think is probably the obvious answer by a driver of the name of Kevin Harvick, because he's got 9 of them. How many consecutive wins?
Yeah.
I want to say it's not 2. That would be too easy. I want to say he did it 3 times. I don't know when, but I want to say he did it 3 times. 4 would be really tough. So I'm going to say he did it 3 times, but I couldn't tell you when.
It was 4 times. He did it
was
from
4 times.
He did it from 2013 to 2015. And I remember he won the 4 straight, and then Dale Jr. won the rain shortened race. And then Harvick was second in that race, and then he won the following one.
Yeah,
so you take out the rain, it could have been 6 straight wins there. He was on such an insane
crazy run. Man. That's crazy. Wild. Like Harvick's numbers at Phoenix, like to dominate as much he did is really like next level. Like I don't know if we'll see a driver dominate as much as he did at a particular track, but Really impressive stuff. Wow,
It saves the
4 times in
yeah,
a row.
yeah. I mean, it
And to
saved
think he could have
seasons.
almost did it 6 times is crazy, man.
Yeah, it was first, second, first.
Wow.
Unbelievable. And Phoenix, I mean, that saved seasons for him. Like 2012 was a terrible year, and he came out and he won, the last race of that year. 2014, he was in a bit of a hole, and that's what got him into Homestead to win his championship. So that
Yeah.
that was a special place for him. Very historic what he achieved there. But he's not in the race
Yeah.
this week, so it kind of opens up the opportunity for anybody else.
Yeah, I'm really excited to hear him call this weekend just because he
Yeah.
was so successful there, and I'm really excited to hear what he has to say, like from a broadcaster standpoint, just the information and all that stuff. Because there's nobody better, so he obviously has it figured out better than anybody, and I think that's just gonna. I think it's gonna be really interesting to hear him talk about the race at Phoenix this weekend. See
And
what he
going
has to say
back,
on the outside looking in for once.
yeah, and going back to Phoenix after his last race there, and which he nearly won. Like he ran tremendously well all the way into the end. So yeah, I
Yeah.
can't wait to hear him talk about that place.
Yeah, should be fun. Short track of the year, Phoenix. I'm hoping, man, that the short track product this year is just a little better than it has been. We'll get the first test of the spoiler, I believe, this weekend. So I think we'll kind of see, hopefully, some better racing. Just honestly,
Yes.
just some better racing, some more competition. Phoenix is certainly an interesting character of a short track, where you just have so many more lanes to pass, and they obviously get thinned out in dog leg. So it makes
Mhm.
it a little bit more exciting, and obviously a big race for these teams, considering this is where the championship is being held in November. So you're gonna see a lot of teams, really coming seriously this year, at this race to see what they can do and kind of put in in the bank to prepare for Phoenix. So should be interesting. But let's talk about it. William Byron, defending race winner. Ross Chastain, the most recent winner. Just talk about some drivers here that we're kind of looking at. Maybe not necessarily at the top in particular. I want to talk about Michael McDowell for a minute, because we did say that front row did kind of come back down to earth. Like they definitely did. Um, but I want to see if they could rebound here and show a little more in the desert that we saw in the first 2 races. And McDowell last year, like, put together some career bests on short tracks. He had a 12.6 average finish. He was pretty solid in these
Mhm.
races at Phoenix last year. So just understanding, where they were last year with the resources that they have, what they could do now with the resources that they do have, and just the speed that McDowell has brought to kind of start the year. I'm not going to overlook him. And like,
Mhm.
I will say the odds right now for most of these drivers are just really tough. There are
Yeah.
so many long prices here, man. But not to say that McDowell is going to win this race, but 100 to 1 in the outright market. There's really nothing else that's out there right now. It's particularly early in the week. But that's incredibly long for a driver who could be a 12th place car, and could at least, poke his nose into the top 10. Again, if things
Mhm.
get out, some strategy comes in, maybe there's a chance McDowell could at least be a potential player late in the race. But we won't go that far just yet. I want to see, kind of what they could do to rebound from a mediocre Las Vegas weekend. But just knowing the race he put together, I didn't know that he was this consistent and, was like a top 13 car week in and week out on
Yeah.
short tracks last year.
Mhm.
Curious to see what McDowell could do. Gillen, I'm sorry, not so much. Like, I hope he shocks me again, like he did the first 2 races.
Yeah.
But McDowell, just knowing his experience, what he can kind of do on multiple different track types, he's kind of shown it. But has put together some solid results. So hopefully this team can, find a little bit more momentum and show a little bit more here in Phoenix this weekend.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned it. Like Phoenix is always a tricky pick. More than a lot of tracks. This is a place that really sees a lot of guys nail it. At least for 2 or 3 years, and you look at the numbers, and a lot of guys are at the top, and a lot of guys. I think 6 drivers have an average finish better than 10th. In the last 3 years there. So that's really close. One of them, Harvick, he's not in it, but with the new, short track package, it could fall into different drivers' sensibilities. And my eye goes right to Ryan Blaney, who's right at the top of the sheet. Shockingly, no win. He's never won at Phoenix.
Crazy, right?
Outside of winning a championship, he's never won an actual race. Three
Yeah.
straight seconds dating back to 2022. And ever since the next gen car came in, he's just been nearly unstoppable there. There's always been that one guy to get him at the end one way or another, but his worst finish in the next gen area at Phoenix is fourth, and that was actually his best race there with 143 laps led from pole. So you
Yeah.
got to be looking at him. He and Bubba are the only drivers with multiple top fives this year. So you factor in the track versus the speed that he's coming off of, particularly these last 2 weeks. And he's in a really good spot right now. Penske overall, I think Logano, he has a great average finish here, 8.5 since 2021. He's been front row. Joey, he's been qualifying tremendously well, with multiple ways that he's gone about that. But on the race side, he's always been kind of falling off and hasn't been coming home where he probably should be. And we mentioned, how he was last year coming off the title from the year before. And, he's kind of right there with RFK with, he's not there at the end like you would anticipate him being. And he's so difficult to nail down and predict because he is able to dominate races and win and do anything any week, but he's also able to run 12th, and just not be a factor at all. So it's hard to kind of tie him down. Blaney, to me, has been the consistent leader of Penske for over a year now, and perhaps that'll continue, or Logano can kind of start to show that type of speed that we're used to seeing from him. And you mentioned Chastain; he's the defending track winner. He's in a really good spot as well. I love where his head is. I think he's really going to take the pit road penalties seriously. That was really the leading topic on Sunday night after the race, was how embarrassed he was that this has happened numerous times already. A lot of guys have had a ton of issues, and I just think a lot of these teams have to put more time into that pit road game. Like, you can't be having those problems because it's so hard to come back. And we don't know what Sunday really has in store, but it is really important to be up front and to have that track position. And if you do silly things like going over the line by, a tenth of an inch, or if you're speeding, or if, a tire falls out of the box, like, got to get those things together. And with speeding, that's all driver. That's all you getting in your own head and just having an out of body experience and knowing what's on the line. And if you can just stay with that guy in front of you and save those extra few tenths, a few extra tenths on a mile and a half, that is just huge with the aero game and everything that goes on. And he just has to narrow that down, and he's going to be around at the end. A lot of these guys are, but I would put my money on a Blaney or a Chastain, and we mentioned Chase Briscoe as well. He has great momentum coming into this race despite not having the results. But Phoenix is a great track for him. And Stewart-Haas overall, they've shown life on short tracks these last few years, particularly, Martinsville, where they tend to dominate. But even at Phoenix, he has a fourth and a seventh after that win. So it wasn't like it kind of came out of nowhere. He has shown good speed there in the past. So a lot of guys to look at. I'm really excited to see who comes out on top.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I'm with you on Blaney. When you take a look at these guys at the top, he has basically done all but win at Phoenix. So yes, won the championship last year, but it would have been much sweeter thing if he had gotten that win. A championship is still a championship. What am I saying? But still, Blaney is strong, man, and he's consistent, and we might not talk about him for most of the day, but he just finds his way there at the end, and he's able to put together the finish. So I like him a lot, and he's been the one driver that has been performing really well for Ford, despite kind of the slow start. But I like Blaney a lot. You mentioned Logano. I mean, Joey, again, he has the qualifying speed. His results here at Phoenix last year were not particularly great, but he's still – is a former winner here in the next gen, has an 8th place finish as well in 2022. He just needs to this team, I feel like the car just falls off. They have all the short run speed in the world. When it comes down to these long green flag runs, they bottom out somehow. But you expect this 22 is still going to qualify, near the front. That's super important. And at a 14-1 price for Logano, I mean, I would still bite at that, even though he hasn't really had the race winning speed to show. I think it's giving us a little opportunity to get ahead for Logano, knowing that the qualifying speed has been really next level this year. So he's certainly a name I would look at, and I think he could potentially turn it around. You look at Byron, you look at Kyle Larson, like it's just a 1, 2, 3 at the top here, with Blaney included. I want to talk Denny Hamlin for a minute, because ever since winning Clash, I feel like we haven't really called his number this year. He finished a quiet 8th at Las Vegas. I mean, Martin Truex Jr., I know you've really loved to start the year. He's just been incredibly consistent, putting together really good finishes. I mean, Ty Gibbs is coming on with a 5th place finish, and then Christopher Bell looking to get back into, the win column for sure, but just looking to get some momentum back after a rough Las Vegas. But what's your read on Denny? Because we really haven't seen much from him, and he's been good, but just not the Denny Hamlin that I feel like we were expecting to come out firing. So what do you think his outlook is looking at Phoenix this weekend?
It's a stable place to build from. I think I would think I wouldn't be. I'm not concerned, but I would look at it differently if his teammates were running pretty similar. Like if they were, barely, if they weren't hitting the top 5, if they were just getting top 10s, and I know Bella's had, big issues these last 2 weeks. But just looking at Truex and looking what numbers he's putting down and how many passes he's doing, and his just fast laps and just everything, like he's running super well this year. And it hasn't been a lot of laps led, hasn't been really contending for wins, though Atlanta, he was right up front until he kind of got aero blocked by Suarez, and then he fell to the back, with just a few laps to go. Ty Gibbs is coming off one of his best Cup races ever. For him to have, a pit issue with the tire, for him to not lose his head and to come back. And, we heard a little hotness over the radio with him and Martin contending for positions there, but that's all good competition, and he didn't let that sacrifice what was a great run, and he got a top 5, and Truex is still there. But Denny has just been a quiet start to the year. When Gibbs is on it, you expect him to be the leader of the ones who are on it, and to be running up there, contending for wins, especially 1.5 miles. And even super speedways, like he's owned Daytona, the late 2010s to the early 2020s here. Like he's been killer there. And this year he was just playing a different game. Like I remember he was running in the back a lot of the day, and he was just timing the race out. And, it was midway through the last stage, and he was up front. He was leading. I'm like, okay, this is what he does. This was planned from lap 1. And then it just didn't work out at the end. He lost, the track position up front. The big wreck happened, and there he was. And Atlanta, he got caught up in an incident with Briscoe. Looked like he was going to avoid it, but made contact. And then here, he just wasn't much of a factor. He found his way up there at one point, but just kind of, as you said, was just kind of stuck there and just didn't do a whole lot. So I am a bit surprised, but, I wouldn't say concerned, because I know the team is bringing the speed. He just needs to execute himself, and maybe it's just closer competition across all 4 cars. Ty has a little bit more of experience, and Truex, we know he's great in the regular season usually, and that's where we are right now. So maybe it's just going to be 4 cars that are just going to be very close in speed, and where Denny falls among those 4 cars, we're going to find out here.
Yeah, 100%. Definitely interested to see what the 11 car could do. Just Gibbs as a whole, what speed they can bring to Phoenix. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned Chastain smoked the field here last fall. I mean, top 3 and 3 of the last 4 in the next gen. You can't overlook him here. And even, that one outlier finish was, I'm pretty sure, when he and Denny Hamlin got got together, during all of that drama. So Chastain's going to be a force to be reckoned with. I mean, I feel like I've talked about him every single week, but I love what he's brought. If it weren't for the pit road penalty, I think it would have been tough to contend with Larson. He would have been a mainstay in the top 5 at Vegas. I think Phoenix is going to be another great spot for him. His best price available right now is 11-1. I think they continue to shrink because I think the public's going to be on Chastain once again. So, that number is shrinking just a little bit week to week here. So take advantage of it while you can. Tyler Reddick is 18-1. I'm pretty sure that's his best price at the moment. Yeah. It's not his best ex Phoenix, but 2 for 2 at finishing 3rd in the spring race in the next gen. I think there's something to be said. The speed at Vegas was really good. So that's just a really long price for Reddick. Another one that I think is just going to continue to get short. I would certainly nibble at that. We talked about Chase Briscoe. I'm really interested to see what he could do. Josh Berry as well. I mean, 80-1 on DraftKings. He is upwards of 150-1 at some sports books. So the discrepancies early in the week are massive. Again, a driver you don't expect to win, but when top 5 odds and top 10 odds drop, certainly going to be interested in a Josh Berry top 10 and potentially even a top 5. So you got to look at some of these guys. Again, just the numbers here at Open are incredibly long, but I love Ryan Blaney coming into this weekend. I love Ross Chastain coming into this weekend. Again, I'm curious in the performance of like the Michael McDowells, like I mentioned before. Obviously, Stewart Haas Racing, like we talked about as well, and even kind of looking at Josh Berry. Who else is kind of up here that's a little bit interesting? I mean, Austin Dillon, RCR's been solid to start the year. Austin Dillon, another guy that I would kind of look at for a potential top 10. 12th,
Vegas.
16th, 13th.
Yeah.
And he was pretty solid at Vegas.
He was passing Kyle Busch at one point.
Yeah.
Both BetMGM cars were right by each other. Yeah.
Yeah. So you gotta like that, for Austin, who I feel like his seat's been hot for years, but not hot enough because we know the story there, So we'll have to see. Austin Hill, how you doing? I know you're going to be coming up the ranks here probably next year.
Yeah.
So we'll see what Austin could do, but we'll get a better idea as the week goes on, as tickets start to get filed. Who the public is looking at to get a good finish. But for me, for the driver that I think is going to be parking it in victory lane this weekend, I would take Ryan Blaney, but I think a driver that can kind of just kind of been hanging, that I think can just kind of come out and do it. Maybe Martin Truex Jr. Maybe he's got something to show. Can finally put one in the win column. But I'm most confident in Ryan Blaney and Ross Chastain this weekend. Certainly much like yourself. Those are the two drivers that have shown all of the dominance at Phoenix, and I think it's a good spot for both of them. We can kind of get a little bit of a flashback to the fall, and see if Blaney can come out on top here. But I certainly like those guys, and I would be interested in the betting market for Chastain's price at 11-1, for Tyler Reddick at 18, even Logano I think at 14 is certainly interesting because he can come out and he can get it done as well. So first short track of the year should be a fun one, but certainly a lot of guys that we're going to be keeping our eye on and see who can get one in the win column this year, become the 4-winner of the year, or see if we get a repeat potentially with Kyle Larson or somebody else.
I hope we get a repeat battle with Chastain and Blaney from last fall, because that was one of the best battles of the year. We know how spicy Blaney can be over the radio, and he was pretty hot over Chastain last week. You bring those two right back to the same place, a lot less on the line this time, but they're both going to be really quick. You can't ignore Blaney's numbers, so I got to go with you and go with Ryan as well. Just everything is in line for a fantastic day. He's, as I said, the win hasn't been there, but there's no telling when that win's going to come, and it can easily be on Sunday. So Gibbs, Penske, and Hendrick, those three organizations are going to be all over each other. It's going to be really close, but I would give it to Penske, at least at the moment, leading into the weekend.
Yeah, hopefully Ford can show up and they could show some more speed here. But even with that, these guys, I think all three of those teams, like you said, I mean, they're the three premier teams in the series, and these are tracks where winners show up and they always show up. So we'll definitely be looking at those guys, and then of course, keeping our eyes on Stewart-Haas, one of those mid-pack contenders that could try and poke their nose up there, see what they could do. But should be a fun one out there on the West Coast once again. So, short track racing again, I think there's going to be a lot of eyes on it, just understanding the nature of how it was last year. And hopefully, the improvements that NASCAR made to the car really kind of show us a little something and can at least get us a little bit more excited at short track racing. It's been a hell of a start to the year with what we have seen. And I just hope that we can continue to kind of carry that momentum and not, flatline in race number 4 to, kind of just deplete all of that. But I don't know. I don't think we'll necessarily get, most of that. I think it'll be a pretty solid race. So excited for it. But Zach, that's gonna put a bow on this one this week. I think a lot of good stuff was covered, and we certainly have a lot to talk about. And I'm sure we will have a lot to talk about next week. So before we wrap up, as always, let people know what you're working on. What do we got cooking up this week here, man?
Woo, a lot of racing. Of course, we got, NASCAR in Phoenix. I'm going to be cutting the extended highlights, so look forward to those. IndyCar as well from St. Pete. They're firing up their engines, so they're starting their season. I think I'm pulling triple duty this week with IndyCar, NASCAR, Xfinity Cup, and then VP Sports Car Racing Challenge. So actually 4 series. So that is my heaven. I cannot wait. I am excited for this weekend, not only to watch it all, but to bring the best moments of the weekend to the viewers over at Motorsports and NBC YouTube channel.
Yeah, man, I'll be right there with you, covering IndyCar this weekend. Really excited for that season to kick off. Should be a lot of fun. And then, of course, NASCAR in Phoenix. So we'll be in tandem on that once again. Supercross round 9 coming out of Daytona Beach. I mean, just incredible stuff coming out of IndyCar, man. I am loving just how much this sport has skyrocketed. They announced the SMX playoffs last weekend, which will be in Las Vegas for the final, which is just going to be absolutely incredible. And then making stops at the drag in Charlotte and Texas Motor Speedway. They're heading to for the second round of the playoffs. So that'll be a lot of fun. But we love all motorsports here. Obviously, we do it for a living, and we couldn't be happier with the results that we've been getting so far. So, it's going to be a lot of stuff coming out. We are really in the weeds of the motorsports season, even with IMSA now. Really starting to get back on their regular schedule coming out of the Rolex. Should be a lot of fun. So. You know where to go for it. Motorsports on NBC YouTube channel, NBCSports.com, all of our writers and all of our great talent, doing everything that they should be doing. It's been a lot of really good stuff, and it's only going to get bigger and better as the season progresses, and we continue to find our mojo and find our rhythm here. But all good stuff, Zach. I'm on Twitter at MV Bachmann. You can check out the NASCAR betting preview show for the Xfinity Series show, the preview for this weekend's race at Phoenix, and then Truck Series is off this weekend, I believe. So we got Xfinity and Cup. We got betting previews, the live show on Twitter Spaces and on YouTube at 8 p.m. on Wednesdays, the In Between Media YouTube channel. So shout out to the NASCAR betting preview show and those guys. And yeah, our show here, catch it on YouTube. We'll have clips throughout the week as well. So be sure to subscribe, follow, leave a review. And we'll be back for next week to break this one down. And then short track racing again in Bristol. Yeah, we're heading to Bristol after Phoenix.
I believe so. Yeah. So
Bristol,
we're gonna get
baby.
Yeah, we'll get a good taste test of what this car is doing out there. And of course, 100%. We're back on the concrete. So that's going to be a fan favorite.
I'm so happy about that. It was a fun little idea. But I was always part of the crowd is why. And I guess there is a genuine, legitimate argument against because short track racing has sucked recently. But like, why would you sacrifice one of the best tracks on the schedule just to throw dirt on it to create a quote unquote spectacle? Like, don't tamper with that. I feel like, there was something that just seemed ingenuine, or disingenuous rather, about, doing that. So excited to see the pavement of Bristol once again in the spring. But yeah, that'll be a fun one too. Food City 500. So back-to-back short tracks, and then we're going road course racing for the first time this year at COTA. So that'll be a fun little stretch in the month of March, and then we'll close it out at Richmond. So 3 short tracks here in March, man. That's interesting.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's exciting. It's a really cool little string of races here. We kind of lost the West Coast swing in a way because of Auto Club, but we replaced it with kind of a short track swing with a COTA, which definitely has short track type of contact. And hopefully we get a lot of, open wheel talent and guys coming in, and we can see guys have a little taste test of what NASCAR is, because it's a wild sport. We see things here that we don't see anywhere else. And I'm excited for this month of March. It's a cool lineup.
Yeah, should be a lot of fun, man. We'll be talking about it. So be sure, like I said, follow, subscribe. We'll be here talking about it, and that'll be all great stuff. But Zach, appreciate you as always. Really good stuff today. And, we'll talk this week. We'll be working this weekend. So again, Motorsports on NBC, NBCsports.com for your NASCAR, IndyCar, Supercross fix, IMSA as well. We got it coming out. It's an exciting time. So we're just getting started, and we're going to be keeping our foot on the gas the entire year. So for Zach, Mike, yours truly, thanks so much for watching, for listening, however you're consuming this podcast. We'll be back next week to break it down and preview the race at Bristol. But enjoy your weekend, and we will talk to you soon.